name is Ane Sudaka. I am back for presentation 2 on step acquisition of control. This is the first step within the changes in degree of interest or degree of control. Let's quickly have a picture of what happens with the step acquisition of control. So one may be holding a financial instrument, which is an investment below 20% if control is based on voting rights. And that investment can move straight to control if the acquirer adds or acquires further interest, which gives them control, which is they add such that they are not greater than 50%. Or the acquirer may actually have an associate, which is less than 50%, and buy a little bit more, which gives them control greater than 50%. Step acquisition also happens when a financial instrument is moved from that accounting boundary to an associate, which is moving from 15% to 25%. Now, what is the key issues or the key aspect to focus on in this issue? The first thing that you need to watch out on is the date of acquisition. You may have or be tempted, because there are so many dates or there's so many points in which interest has been acquired. So the date of acquisition is very important, which is the date when control is obtained. The calculation of goodwill becomes a little bit different as an added aspect under paragraph 32. Then the remeasurement gain or loss on acquisition. So when you acquire, there is need to remeasure and there is a gain or loss that comes out. Also, acquisition of profits and reserves before and after change in interest. In other words, if I was holding 30%, which means I'm a non-controlling interest, and I'm now holding 70%, I have to be profits have to be shared proportionately to what I'm holding. Then there is an issue of a reclassification adjustment that also happens at the date when control is obtained. Now let's start with acquisition debt. So for an example here, where H acquired S by way of series of purchases that took place as follows. So first of all, 13 March, 18 May 2000, 10% was acquired, 4% later, 13%, 10 and 14. The question is, what is the acquisition debt? They're now sitting with 80%. Now, the acquisition debt is the debt when control is obtained by the acquirer. And at what point? So if one looks at 5 plus 10, 15, plus 4, 19, plus 13, which is 32, plus, which then was already an associate, plus 10, 42, plus 40, that's now 82. So the date when control was obtained is 19 January 2002, which is the date when control was acquired. Assuming that control is through voting rights, therefore the date when acquired 40%, we moved from 42 to 82. Hence, that is the date of acquisition, or the acquisition date. Now, let's learn to identify. So we're going to focus deeply into paragraph 41, 42, and 43, and to learn how to apply these paragraphs. Paragraph 41 simply identifies a business combination achieved in stages or a step acquisition. What does it say? It says an acquirer sometimes obtains control of an acquiring in which it already was holding some equity instruments immediately before the acquisition date. So acquisition date is, for the previous example, is 19 January 2002. What that means is immediately before, which is day before or the same day, they're holding 42% already. And then that is the acquisition date because they acquired 40% more, which gave them control. So in this example, on paragraph 41, it gives us an example. It says on 31 December, entity A is already holding 35%, and it's a non-controlling interest in entity B. On the same date, entity A purchases an additional 40, which takes them from 35 to 70%. And if control is based on that, they already then have control of entity B. And IFRS 3 refers to this transaction as a business achieved in this combination achievement stages, sometimes also referred to as step acquisition. It's very important to note that IFRS 3 was amended with the paragraph 42A. It says also step acquisition procedures also applies to joint operations the same way it does for joint ventures or associates. So that was some sort of clarification. So I'm showing you in terms of subsidiary, but the same principles would apply to joint operation, joint venture or associate. Now, we go to paragraph 42. What does paragraph 42 say? So we have identified the step acquisition. Now, that's just identification. This is step acquisition. And we learned this in presentation 1, part 1. The second part is then, how do I account? What is the accounting treatment of step acquisition? In a business combination achieved in stages, first of all, the acquirer shall remeasure its previously held equity interest in the acquiring in its acquisition date favored, and then recognize the resulting gain or loss, if any, in P&L or other comprehensive income, OCI. And we call that the remeasurement gain. And it should either be in P&L or in OCI, which is dependent on the nature of the investment. Now that we are crossing an accounting boundary, there is always a requirement to reclassify. And paragraph 42 requires a reclassification adjustment. Let me probably reiterate that whenever you are crossing an accounting boundary, you should reclassify. I'll give a simple example. If we have PPE, property plant equipment under IFRS 16, which is held either at cost or at revaluation model. When we reclassify that PP, let's say it's a land or it's building, we reclassify that to investment property. Because we are moving an accounting boundary from IFRS 16 to IFRS 40 investment property, we always reclassify. So because we are moving either from financial instrument or from associate, we should always reclassify. So when we reclassify or do an adjustment, it simply says, sometimes in the past, the investment that was held was either held as available for sale or as fair value through OCI, available for sale under IFRS 39, or fair value through OCI, or some investment, some gains and losses under that investment, especially for investment in associate or joint venture, was recognized previously in other comprehensive income. When you reclassify, when you move from one accounting boundary to the other, all those items should be taken as if they've been realized. It should be taken as if the investment has been sold and realized, and they should be reclassified. And the reclassification rules are driven by the specific standard from which that investment comes from. So I'll go again step by step on paragraph 42. Step number 1, the investment should be remeasured previously held equity interest should be remeasured at the acquisition debt fair value. The acquisition debt being the debt when control is acquired. So we should remeasure that investment. But remember that that investment under step 2 already had its own carrying amount. So when you remeasure at fair value and compare with the existing carrying amount, it may be a gain or loss, which we illustrate just now in the future slides. That gain or loss is recognized in P&L or OCI, whichever is appropriate. Step 3, we need to reclassify the previous other comprehensive income items or reserves as required by the specific or related IFRSs. So if it's revaluation surplus, which went through OCI, we got by 16, it's part of 41 there to see how we should remeasure or reclassify reclassify those other comprehensive income, the revaluation reserve. And if it's financial instrument, we go to financial IFRS 9 or whatever another specific. If it's translation reserve, which is the foreign currency translation reserve, we go to IS 21, and we will deal with that part when we look also at foreign operations. Now let's go deep again under step 1 and 2. So let's look at the nature of the previously held equity interest, the measurement before, the acquisition debt, measurement of acquisition debt, and the gain or loss recognition. So if the investment is held as a financial asset under IAS 27 paragraph 10b, which is the fair value through financial asset. So the measurement before is fair value. Now, at acquisition debt, we have to measure at fair value, and those fair value may be different from the previous one and this one. And the difference is a fair value through P&L, which means you are simply recognizing the increase in fair value in this case. It's a fair value through OCI financial asset. So under paragraph 27 in B again, it's measured before at fair value, and the acquisition debt is measured at fair value again, which means this increase in fair value is taken to other comprehensive income as a gain or loss. Now, if it's an investment associate or joint venture, the measurement before, which is what we call equity accounting. In equity accounting, remember, we take your cost, you add in the share of the investment of the acquirer of all the reserves, profit and loss, share of other comprehensive income, share of retained earnings, impairment. That equity accounted carrying amount is what we have. Is the date of acquisition. We have to bring it to the date of acquisition and then compare with the fair value on that day. The fair value being the fair value of the shares of the equity instruments held. And at accounting, that fair value is likely to be different in the most cases. And the difference is a gain or loss, which is recognized in P&L. Let's present it differently, or especially in terms of a journal entry. So we talked about the fair value through P&L. So in other words, when this happens at date of acquisition under paragraph 42, one debits the investment if it's a gain, and credit the fair value adjustment if it's a loss, vice versa. And the deferred tax also, because it's a financial, if it's listed, then definitely we use 1%. If it's unlisted, we use the relevant 20% or appropriate capital gains rate, because equity instruments are marketable securities. If it's a fair value through OCI investment, definitely if there's a gain, debit the fair value through OCI investment, credit the market reserve in the OCI, and also charge the tax directly in the other comprehensive income where the gain also happens. And that also the deferred tax is a CGT again, because a marketable security, and the rate depends whether it's listed or unlisted. If it's an associate, the gain or loss is remeasured at acquisition debt as well. And let's say it's a 25%, So we measure the fair value of previously held interest, 25%, which is 25% shares times their fair value on that day. Then we compare with the carrying amount of the equity accounted investment, which means we've applied S28 to come to that equity accounted investment, the difference, the gain or loss. And that gain or loss moves our investment associate or joint venture by debiting or crediting, depending whether it's a gain or loss, and crediting or debiting the gain or loss to the P&L. This we do before we reclassify, before we close the investment associate account. So you remeasure in the previous category, in the previous accounting boundary. When you take the investment now, because it's no longer investment associate, it's now investment subsidiary. When you transfer that investment now to be part of the investment subsidiary, it's supposed to be already at fair value. Right. Now let's talk about reclassification. So on the reclassification, it depends again on what you're holding. If you're holding, a reclassification definitely will be for anything that went to OCI. So first of all, under investment holding OCI, reclassification of gains to OCI if the previous holder was held at OCI, and we need to reclassify the market reserve to retained earnings as if the interest was disposed of. And we use IFRS 9 because this is a fair value to OCI, which is an IFRS 9 investment. So IFRS 9 B5.7.1 deals with the reclassification, and it says we may leave the investment like that, or we may reclassify, and that's depending on our accounting policy. So if we want a mark-to-market reserve, we debit the mark-to-market reserve to OCI and credit our retained earnings. Okay, in the statement of shares and equity. The equity accounted investment, which is the associate or joint venture, while it was an associate or joint venture, we may have recognized devaluations reserve, mark-to-market, foreign currency translation reserve through OCI as part of our share of other comprehensive income. Now, on the debt, when we acquired control, we are required under by para 42 to reclassify. And on that debt, we need to reclassify all those reserves, and we said we use the specific standard, which is for revaluation reserve S16, for market IFRS 9, for foreign currency translation S21, and definitely we debit the reserve, then revaluation reserve, we debit the market reserve, the FCTR, and all that either goes to retained earning if it's supposed to go directly, otherwise it goes through the reclassification gain to the P&L. So especially the FCTR. Now, whilst those journal entries, the discussion, the understanding is very important. The other most important is that one should be able to know the impact of a step acquisition in the consolidated or in the profit and loss and other comprehensive income. So we've been discussing the impact and referring to P&L and to OCI. Now we're now looking and saying what are the expected impact, or what is the expected impact on the P&L and OCI. So let's talk about an associate to subsidiary, the first column on the left. If it's an associate to subsidiary, include only profit items for period after acquisition date, which means in our consolidated financial statement, we're now only expecting the profit and loss, which is the revenue and expenses for the subsidiary from acquisition date going forward. Then on the date of acquisition, we expect a remeasurement gain from para 42. The remeasurement gain either in P&L or in OCI, whatever is appropriate. Then if there was an OCI before, or OCI things that have been recognized, we also then expect the reclassification adjustment in the P&L. Then if it was an associate, just like business an associate or a joint venture, we then also expect a share of profit for the period before acquisition date. So if we have got an investment which was an associate for a reporting date of 31 December, we got control on 1 July. It means that the subsidiary starts on 1 July to 1 December. So for that period, we are accounting for the whole for revenue and expenses of the subsidiary as if they are ours. We're combining that with the parents. But before then it was an associate, we only can take a share of profit for the first 6 months. And on 1 July, we should have a remeasurement gain. We should have reclassification adjustment for the OCI items. And then we should also have a share of OCI before acquisition. But if it's a financial asset to subsidiary on the right-hand column, we only include P&L items for product acquisition. So same example, our year end is 31 December, we acquired the investment or control on 1 July. So it's a subsidiary for 6 months. So we only include 6 months revenue and expenses and OCI items in 100%. And which is what we call an interim acquisition. Include remeasurement gain again on 1 July, but you are now remeasuring your financial asset in this case. And the reclassification adjustment into P&L or OCI is appropriate. Then you have got your fair value gains or losses before. So I had to remeasure on 1 July, but I had only lastly measured it on 1 December, and then we recognize. It's very important that one understands how a step acquisition affects the statement of financial position and the statement of change in equity. So from an associate to subsidiary, all the assets and liabilities are initially included at fair value at acquisition date, and subsequently measured accordingly, depreciated, revalued, which means at the end of the year, we expect to see all the assets and the liabilities of the subsidiary together with that of the parent. We expect to see goodwill if there's any. We expect to see NCI for the portion or its share of the net assets and liabilities. The investment associate should not be seen, should be recognized, and any reclassification adjustment should be effected in the statement of equity. If it's a financial asset to subsidiary, we expect again all the assets and liabilities to be measured initially recognized and measured at fair value from acquisition debt, and subsequently remeasured and be included in the balance sheet at the end of the year. Then goodwill should also be seen in NCI, and the investment should also not be seen anymore. Then also the old reclassification adjustment should also be seen. One has to consider the implications of the step acquisition on calculation of goodwill. So if you look at the formula of calculation of goodwill, now under para 32, it includes the fair value through the fair value of previously held equity interest. And it's very important to note that that is for the investment that was already held before an additional interest is acquired. The additional interest is the one that refers to the purchase consideration. On the journal entry, the fair value, the investment in subsidiary is made of the fair value of the previously held equity interest plus the fair value of the consideration of the additional. So in an example like one under para 41, our investment in total of the parent is 75%, which is 35% plus 40. So in other words, our investment is fair value of the 35% plus the fair value of the additional 40, which makes up 75%. It is very also important now to note when you're looking at consideration of investment, there are two ways in which it happens. We can acquire control through a transfer of consideration, or we can acquire control with no transfer of consideration. If we have got transfer of consideration, we use IFRS 3 para 37 to 40. And also, if we do not transfer control, we use para 43 and to para 44. And the treatment is still exactly the same. But it's very important to note the differences. So if I acquire control, which is the if I transfer consideration in acquiring control or in acquiring a subsidiary, I measure the transferred consideration at fair value, acquisition at fair value. But if control is acquired with no transfer of consideration, we only therefore remeasure the previously held equity interest at fair value. There's nothing else to measure in this case. What are the examples of or circumstances in which consideration could be acquired without consideration, without transfer of consideration? An example where a share buyback happens and acquiree, which is our investee, acquires from the other party other than us. So if we have, as an example, 40%, and the other guy or the other party has 60%, and a share buyback happens, and they go and buy 30% back from the other guy, which means the other guy is now ending up 30%, we're ending up with 40 of 70 now, which means by that effect we end up with control without doing anything or transferring, which means we simply have to remeasure our fair value of the 40%. Otherwise, if we go back to example 4, there could be a lapse of a veto right, which has been stopping. Okay, so if you look at WHL, which had 80% and control was with Mr. Titus with 20%. By the passing on of Mr. Titus, WHL immediately and effectively obtains control because the veto right lapses on the same day. The acquirer and acquiree may also just agree to combine their businesses by contract alone, and the parent ends up being given control through a shareholders agreement, and that also gives control. Now, I would encourage you, after learning this and after appreciating this principle of self-acquisition, to go and do examples 4.1 to 5.2 in your module. And next, we will be looking and deeply into 3, which talks about loss of control in terms of IFRS 10. Thank you.